June 1944. A freight train carrying enough explosives to level an entire town is rolling through the English countryside. Suddenly, flames erupt from one of the cars. The driver has exactly 90 seconds to make an impossible choice: try to save the train or save himself. What happens next will be remembered as one of the most selfless acts in British history. But here's what you don't know. This story was almost buried by the government, and the reason why will shock you. It's 1:40 in the morning on June 2nd, 1944. The village of SOHAM in Cambridgeshire is dark and quiet. Most people are asleep, dreaming, unaware that in less than 2 minutes, their entire world will nearly cease to exist. A freight train is approaching from the south. At the controls is 44-year-old Benjamin Gimbert, a veteran railway engineer with over 20 years of experience. Standing beside him is his fireman, 28-year-old James Nighthall. They're hauling a special cargo, a cargo so dangerous that if anyone in SOHAM knew what was passing through their village at that moment, they'd evacuate immediately. The train is carrying 44 wagons loaded with American bombs destined for RAF air bases. We're talking about over 400 tons of high explosives, 500-pound bombs, incendiaries, the works. It's enough firepower to obliterate everything within a half-mile radius. 4 days from now, these bombs will be dropped on Nazi Germany. Operation Overlord, D-Day, is less than a week away. The Allies are stockpiling everything they need for the invasion of France. This train is part of that effort. Every bomb matters. Every delivery counts. Benjamin Gimbert is pushing the locomotive steady at about 40 miles per hour. It's a routine run. He's done it dozens of times. The track is familiar. The load is secure. Everything is by the book. Then, as they approach SOHAM Station, James Nighthall leans out of the cab to check the train, as firemen routinely do. What he sees makes his blood turn to ice. The wagon directly behind the locomotive, the one closest to them, is on fire. Not smoking, not smoldering, on fire. Flames are visible, licking up from the undercarriage. He jouts to Ben, "The wagon's on fire." For a split second, time seems to stop. Ben Gimbert's brain processes what this means. That wagon is loaded with bombs. So is every wagon behind it. If those bombs explode, it won't just destroy the train. It will destroy SOHAM Station. It will destroy the houses near the station. It will kill everyone sleeping in those houses. Women, children, entire families. The safest thing for Ben and James to do is obvious. Jump off the locomotive immediately, run as far and as fast as they can, and hope they get clear before the explosion. But Ben Gimbert doesn't jump. Neither does James Nighthall. Instead, Ben makes a decision that defies every survival instinct in his body. He shouts to James, "We've got to get that wagon uncoupled." Think about what he's proposing. They're going to disconnect the burning wagon, the one that could explode at literally any second, from the rest of the train. To do this, James will have to climb down from the moving locomotive, walk between the locomotive and the burning wagon, and manually release the coupling mechanism. He'll be inches from hundreds of pounds of high explosives that are actively on fire. But James doesn't hesitate. He nods and climbs down. Ben starts applying the brakes, slowing the train as they enter SOHAM Station. But he can't stop completely. If he does, the burning wagon will be right in the middle of the platform, surrounded by railway buildings and workers' cottages. Instead, he brings the speed down to about 15 miles per hour. James Nighthall, standing between the locomotive and a rolling bomb, reaches for the coupling. His hands are shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through his system. He can feel the heat from the fire. He can smell the smoke. He knows that if the bombs explode right now, he won't even have time to feel pain. He'll simply cease to exist. He releases the coupling. The burning wagon detaches from the locomotive. Ben immediately opens the throttle, pulling the locomotive and the remaining 43 wagons forward, away from the fire. The plan is working. They're separating the danger from the populated area. But now they have a new problem. The burning wagon is still rolling along the track right through SOHAM Station, heading towards a railway siding where other wagons are parked. If it reaches those wagons, the explosion will be catastrophic. Multiple trains, multiple loads, all going up at once. Ben makes another split-second decision. He's going to go back for it. He's going to couple back up to the burning wagon and pull it away from SOHAM Station, out into the darkness beyond the village. They've bought maybe 30 seconds, a minute at most. And then the bomb explodes.
The blast is beyond description. Witnesses 20 miles away report seeing the flash. The shockwave shatters windows across SOHAM. The noise is like the end of the world, a rolling thunder that seems to go on forever. The locomotive is lifted off the tracks and thrown sideways. The cab disintegrates, metal shreds, glass becomes shrapnel. The heat is so intense that it melts steel. James Nighthall is killed instantly. He's thrown from the locomotive by the blast and dies before he hits the ground. Ben Gimbert is blown clear. He lands over 50 feet away from where the locomotive used to be. His body is broken, burns, lacerations, fractures. But somehow, impossibly, he's alive. The crater where the wagon exploded is over 40 feet wide and 15 feet deep. The locomotive is destroyed. The burning wagon has been vaporized. Debris is scattered across a half-mile radius. But SOHAM still stands. The station is damaged, but intact. The surrounding houses are damaged, but standing. More importantly, the people in those houses are alive. The other 43 wagons of bombs didn't explode. The railway workers sleeping in the cottages near the station weren't killed. The families living in SOHAM weren't obliterated. The only fatality is James Nighthall. 1 man dead instead of hundreds. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. The British government immediately classifies everything about the incident. Why? Because admitting that a train full of American bombs nearly destroyed a British village just days before D-Day would be a propaganda disaster. The Germans would love that story. It would sow doubt about Allied competence. It would raise questions about safety protocols. It would be a gift to Goebbels' propaganda machine. So, the government buries it. The official report is labeled secret. The newspapers are told to minimize coverage. Ben Gimbert, recovering from his injuries in the hospital, is told not to speak to anyone about what happened. The people of SOHAM know something massive happened. You can't hide a 40-foot crater and a destroyed locomotive. But they don't know the details. They don't know how close they came to being wiped off the map. James Nighthall is buried quietly. His widow is told her husband died in a railway accident. The specifics are classified. She's given a pension and told to move on. Ben Gimbert is eventually awarded the George Cross, Britain's highest civilian award for gallantry. James Nighthall receives a posthumous George Cross. But the ceremonies are low-key, no publicity. The government wants this story to go away. And for decades, it does. The full truth about what happened at SOHAM on June 2, 1944, isn't declassified until years after the war. By then, the world has moved on. There are new crises, new wars, new heroes. But the people of SOHAM never forget. In 2007, over 60 years after the incident, a memorial is finally erected near the site of the explosion. It honors both Ben Gimbert and James Nighthall. The inscription reads, "In proud and grateful memory of driver Benjamin Gimbert, G.C., and fireman James Nighthall, G.C., who gave their lives to save the town." Wait, who gave their lives? But Ben survived, didn't he? Yes, he did. He lived until 1976. But the memorial's wording is deliberate, because while Ben physically survived the blast, in another sense, both men gave their lives that night. They both made the conscious decision to sacrifice themselves. The fact that Ben survived was luck, not choice. Let's think about what these men did. They had every justification to save themselves. Jumping from that locomotive would have been completely understandable. No one would have blamed them. They had seconds to react, no time for contemplation. But they didn't think about themselves. They thought about the people sleeping in Soham, people they'd never met, people who would never even know what almost happened to them. And so they acted. Not because they were ordered to, not because they'd get medals or recognition. They acted because it was the right thing to do. James Nighthall left behind a wife and 2 young children. He knew he had everything to lose. He climbed down between that locomotive and that burning wagon anyway. Ben Gimbert could have pushed James out of the way and jumped off himself. He could have saved his own life. He chose to stay at the controls, to guide the burning wagon away from the village, even though he knew it meant his death. These weren't soldiers trained for combat. They were railway workers, ordinary men doing an ordinary job who, when confronted with an extraordinary situation, responded with extraordinary courage. The story of Soham raises profound questions about duty, sacrifice, and heroism. What makes someone risk everything for strangers? What drives a person to choose almost certain death over personal safety? There's no easy answer. Ben Gimbert, in later interviews, would always downplay what he did. It was just my job, he'd say. Anyone would have done the same. But that's not true. Most people wouldn't have done the same. Most people would have jumped, and no one would have blamed them. The explosion at Soham occurred 4 days before D-Day. Those bombs that didn't explode, the ones in the other 43 wagons, they were delivered to RAF bases. Some of them were probably dropped on German positions on June 6, 1944, providing cover for the troops landing on the beaches of Normandy. So in a very real sense, Ben Gimbert and James Nighthall's actions on June 2nd contributed to the success of D-Day. By saving those bombs, by preventing their destruction, they played a tiny but crucial role in the liberation of Europe. They never knew that, of course. James was already dead. Ben was fighting for his life in a hospital. Neither could have imagined the ripple effects of their choice that night. Today, if you visit Soham, you can see the memorial. You can read the names. You can stand on the spot where 2 ordinary men did something extraordinary. And if you listen carefully, on a quiet night, you can almost hear the rumble of that locomotive, the shouts of 2 men racing against time, and the explosion that shook the earth but didn't break a town. Because on June 2nd, 1944, Benjamin Gimbert and James Nighthall proved that one person, or 2 people, can make a difference between tragedy and survival, between disaster and deliverance. They proved that heroism isn't about medals or monuments. It's about choice. The choice to act when action seems impossible. The choice to help when helping might kill you. And they proved that sometimes the smallest decisions, stay or jump, act or flee, echo through history in ways we can never predict. James Nighthall never saw his children grow up. He never knew his grandchildren. He never got to hear the town of Soham thank him for what he did. But his name endures. His sacrifice is remembered. And every person who lives in Soham today, every descendant of those families sleeping in their beds on June 2nd, 1944, they owe their existence to 2 railway workers who refused to run. That's not just history. That's legacy.